Bungie recently announced Destiny 2 is receiving its final content update this June, which has drawn increased attention to the possibility of a third Destiny game. It's clear, many players want Destiny 3, especially after the announcement Bungie is ending development of Destiny 2. However, reporting from inside Bungie indicates that no successor in the Destiny franchise has been greenlit, despite years of Destiny players calling for a third game. How does such a highly requested game never see the light of day? It's hard to say definitively given the secrecy surrounding the companies involved, likely not wanting unflattering corporate intrigue to be publicized, but enough credible reporting exists to draw a conclusion, even if we never get official confirmation. In this video, I'm going to attempt to resolve the paradox of Destiny 3 by looking at the series' development history and discuss the problems a third Destiny game would face. Hopefully, even if we never learn the truth, this will at least help us understand. The story of Destiny 3 starts in October 2007. Hot off the success of the Halo trilogy, Bungie separated from Microsoft, going independent, but agreeing to develop 2 more Halo games. In April 2010, as their obligations with Microsoft came to a close, Bungie signed a 10-year publishing agreement with Activision. Activision would provide the resources for Bungie to develop a new franchise, while Bungie would deliver the games. The full text of the contract was later made public due to an unrelated Activision lawsuit. As part of the agreement, 4 Destiny games were planned, referred to as Destiny Game Number 1, 2, 3, and 4, with target release dates of fall 2013, 2015, 2017, and 2019 respectively. Each game would receive a major expansion pack the next year, codenamed Comet Number 1, Number 2, Number 3, and Number 4. They would release in fall 2014, 2016, 2018, and 2020 respectively. Finally, smaller DLC releases are mentioned, but a schedule isn't outlined. Reporting indicates that this would have entailed 2 smaller DLCs per year, 4 per Destiny game. If the original schedule was followed, Destiny 3 would have released nearly a decade ago in 2017. So what happened? If you're familiar with the series, you're probably already aware that none of the Destiny games met the release dates in the original contract. Much of what's publicly known about the production of Destiny 1 comes from the reporting of Jason Schrier, who was able to speak with developers inside Bungie and learn non-public information. In summer 2013, Destiny was rebooted. After reviewing a cut of the game's story, senior leadership at Bungie was unhappy. Instead of providing notes about what to change or fix, they scrapped the entire story. This would have made meeting the fall 2013 date impossible, although it's unclear if Bungie was on track to ship the game on time prior to the reboot. As a result, the game's new story had to be cobbled together from previously existing pieces by a group of leads from various departments, which caused a destination planned to launch with the base game, the Dreadnought, to be moved to Destiny 1's Comet expansion. Finally, Destiny 1 released in September 2014. Reception was mixed, with negative feedback focusing on the game's story. As a result, Destiny didn't meet the benchmark review score of 90 required to receive the $2.5 million quality bonus from the Activision contract. Comet Number 1 was officially released as the Taken King expansion in September 2015, featuring the Dreadnought and a post-reboot story, rather than the originally planned Europa and European Dead Zone destinations. The Taken King received a more positive reception than the base game. As a result, many players believe it saved the Destiny franchise. With the impending release of the Taken King, development resources shifted towards the second game, Destiny 2. Given that Destiny 1 and the Taken King released a year behind schedule, the anticipated date of Destiny 2 was moved back to fall 2016. However, much like its predecessor, Destiny 2 didn't launch in that window. Again, according to reporting by Jason Schrier, the game was rebooted in April 2016. Less is known about this reboot than the Destiny 1 equivalent, but apparently Taken King director Luke Smith took over as game director, and Destiny 2's story was reworked. If April 2016 is the correct date, this wasn't the cause of the Destiny 2 delay, which was announced by Activision in a February 2016 financial report. Instead of releasing in fall 2016, Destiny 2 moved to fall 2017, and a second annual expansion was developed for Destiny 1, eventually titled Rise of Iron, which released in September 2016. When Destiny 2 finally came out in September 2017, it received better reception than its predecessor. However, changes to the gameplay resulted in worse player retention compared to Destiny 1. The weekly active users fell off a cliff, and according to a talk by Bungie's Justin Truman, in February 2018, if retention continued to fall at the same rate, they were about 5 weeks from 0 players, which would have required Bungie to shut the servers down. As a result, in addition to shipping the first annual expansion for the game, Comet 2, Bungie needed to make a bunch of core gameplay changes to retain players and hopefully bring lapsed ones back to the game. This expansion, titled Forsaken, released in September 2018, and much like the Taken King, is considered by many to have saved the franchise. However, in Activision's eyes, Forsaken was a disappointment. The 2010 contract had a provision that gave Activision the right to terminate the relationship if certain conditions were met. One clause allowed Activision to terminate at any point following the launch of Comet 2 for any reason. When Forsaken was launched, this provision went into effect. According to later statements by Activision, in November 2018, they learned that Bungie wanted out of the relationship, so both parties agreed to terminate the contract in December. In a March 2019 earnings call, Activision explained that they had parted ways with Bungie because Forsaken sales had not lived up to their expectations. Bungie disagreed about sales, considering the expansion a success. Other contributing factors mentioned by Activision included Bungie owning the Destiny IP themselves rather than Activision, and the commitment of resources from Activision-owned studios Vicarious Visions and High Moon Studios. Activision wanted to be able to use the studios for other projects. After the termination of the Activision relationship, Bungie retained ownership of the Destiny IP and assumed publishing duties that Activision previously had been in charge of. No longer having the resources and financing of Activision, a decision was made. Instead of beginning to develop Destiny 3, Bungie decided to continue support of Destiny 2 through Comet-style annual expansions, supporting the game as an ongoing live service. This decision came with a cost. In 2019, Bungie released a smaller annual expansion called Shadowkeep, then in 2020 announced the future of the Destiny franchise. They were doubling down on Destiny 2, with 3 planned annual expansions called Beyond Light, Witch Queen, and Lightfall. This meant that Destiny 2 was going to receive updates for a minimum of 6 years, double the length of Destiny 1's 3. On the same day, Bungie announced the Destiny Content Vault. The DCV remains one of the most controversial decisions in the series' history. Destiny 2 had initially been developed under the Activision Agreement, meaning that Destiny 3 would have only been 2 or 3 years away. With Destiny 3 never entering production, Bungie now had to support a game that was growing in scale each year for much longer than originally planned. This led to technical limitations. In a blog post explaining the issues facing Destiny 2's continued development, Bungie said that the game was becoming too large to efficiently update and maintain, leading to bugs, issues patching the game, reduced innovation, and a ballooning file size. Bungie's solution to this problem was to remove content from the game, a practice called sunsetting or content vaulting. What isn't clear from the DCV blog post is is that all existing activities that remained in the game after the launch of Beyond Light needed to be ported to a new version of the game's engine. The best publicly available explanation of this process comes from the portfolio website of a former Bungie developer named Max Nichols, who served as the technical lead and manager of the Beyond Light engine porting team. His portfolio says, "The Beyond Light expansion for Destiny 2 released with a large engine upgrade behind the scenes. This upgrade was mostly invisible to players, but it was incompatible with all of our existing Destiny 2 activity content. This meant that any content we weren't planning to sunset needed to be rebuilt manually." While the justifications provided in the blog post likely also factored into the decision to sunset activities, the fact that Bungie needed to rebuild all remaining content makes their decision-making surrounding the DCV a lot more understandable. It turns sunsetting into a question of prioritizing what would be rebuilt rather than what would be thrown away. While I'm not in game development myself, during the time period Bungie was porting legacy content to the Beyond Light engine, I had a conversation with someone in management at one of Bungie's competitors about the process of porting legacy content to a newer game. While I can't share the exact details, it was a comparable situation. They seemed frustrated with the perception many players had that porting or remastering legacy content was trivial or lazy. It was stressed to me that you cannot simply press a button to port this kind of content, and that instead it needs to be rebuilt completely, which comes with significant costs. This makes porting anything a trade-off. It's cheaper than creating something completely new, but still requires the time of employees that could be spent making something new instead. This peek behind the curtain makes me sympathize with the dilemma Bungie would have faced when porting legacy content to the Beyond Light engine. I'm not saying I like or agree with the decision to not rebuild everything, but I can at least understand it. Nichols' resume explains that the engine porting team had 35 people on it, meaning resources had to be diverted from other parts of the studio. His portfolio also states that he helped estimate how many development hours the porting would require, which was likely presented to Bungie leadership, who would then have made decisions about what resources to give the team and what not to rebuild. We can see from the original blog post that decisions about what not to rebuild were made based on playtime statistics. They specifically say, Warmind's campaign represents only 0.3% of all time played in Season of the Worthy, and yet the Warmind expansion accounts for 5% of our total install size. I'm not a game developer, and I'm fully aware that my knowledge of the subject is insufficient for making these kinds of decisions. However, as a player, I find this rationale misguided. One of my personal pain points about the Destiny franchise is that the campaigns have never been easily replayable. If you complete a campaign on all 3 of your characters, you can't reacquire the quest to experience the full story again without deleting one of your characters, which is undesirable because it forces you to spend a lot of time unlocking things for that character a second time. You can still replay the individual missions for certain campaigns, but without the quest, significant story beats like dialogue, cutscenes, and interstitial gameplay content will be missing. This means that you can't get the complete experience another time without deleting a character. I would be much more inclined to replay Destiny campaigns if I could simply reacquire the quests and play the full story another time. However, in this case, design disincentivizes playing them again, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where people rarely replay old campaigns. This example illustrates the flaws of playtime statistics as a data point for decision-making. It's possible that players want to replay an activity, but are limited by the design of the activity itself. Most of Destiny's story quests are also set up this way, with many being once per character and others being once per account, meaning you can't replay them even on your alternate characters. I've had examples where internet or server issues kicked me out of once per account activities part of the way through, meaning I never got to experience it as intended. Story content also holds significantly higher intrinsic value for new and returning players compared to existing ones. Not being able to experience major story moments means that these players are more likely to get confused and frustrated with later parts of the story than not stick around. Raids also have a similar issue. They historically have had lower playtime than other activities because they don't have matchmaking, meaning you need to assemble a team of 6 on your own. They're also highly team-oriented activities that require active communication and cooperation to complete. Many players are intimidated by this prospect and don't try raids, even if they're interested in them. My point is that playtime statistics cannot be used as a direct proxy for player interest, and using them to justify sunsetting content has the potential to remove activities many players want to play, but just haven't been able to because of other constraints. The Destiny 2 content that wasn't rebuilt for Beyond Light includes 5 patrol zones, all 3 Year 1 story campaigns including the one that launched with the base game, all seasonal narratives and activities, 7 strikes, 5 raids, all 52 adventures, 15 exotic quests, 11 PvP maps, 2 exotic missions, and 2 Gambit maps. A second, much smaller round of sunsetting happened with the release of Witch Queen in 2022, mainly including Forsaken expansion content and Beyond Light seasonal activities. However, later that year, Bungie announced that thanks to engine upgrades, they no longer needed to sunset expansion content with the release of Lightfall. Seasonal content was still sunset each year through Final Shape. While the original DCV blog post stated, "We will bring back or unvault activity and destination content from the DCV each year," the vast majority of content sunset in Beyond Light never returned to the game. This has resulted in it becoming lost media, with no functioning method to play it. It was revealed in a lawsuit that Bungie doesn't even have the ability to play sunset content internally because the underlying technology has changed, rendering the original versions non-functional. This makes it all the more frustrating to me that considerable effort was undertaken to remaster Destiny 1 content for Destiny 2, like the Cosmodrome, 3 of its strikes, and 3 Destiny 1 raids, instead of using those resources to rebuild vaulted Destiny 2 raids and strikes. That Destiny 1 content now exists in 2 extant playable versions, while Sunset content has 0. Sunsetting also burned a lot of community goodwill by removing activities people enjoyed and paid for, and has turned trying to experience Destiny 2's story into a nightmare, where essential plot points are only able to be experienced by watching a YouTube video of someone else's gameplay. The new player experience was also hurt significantly with the removal of Destiny 2's base campaign, the Red War, which was originally designed to be the player's entry point to Destiny 2, teaching them the game's core mechanics and introducing the series' world. The new Light quest is subpar in comparison. It's no wonder that new player retention has struggled since the introduction of the DCV. Picking up Destiny 2 after sunsetting is like trying to watch a TV show, where entire episodes have been lost forever, requiring you to try and learn what happened secondhand from other people's explanations. That's a terrible way to experience a story. The DCV has inevitably become the reason most commonly cited for players wanting Destiny 3. They want a fresh start where they can experience the entire game from start to finish, created with the updated engine technology that allowed Bungie to stop sunsetting expansions. Calls for Destiny 3 intensified after the 2024 Final Shape expansion, which provided a conclusion to the main story arc that began in Destiny 1, called the Light and Darkness Saga. However, Destiny 3 has never been greenlit and may never be. The main reason is money. As Jason Schrier recently said on Bluesky, a lot of people have wondered why Bungie didn't immediately start working on Destiny 3 after the Final Shape 2 years ago. The answer, as it usually is how much money it would take. Shortly before the release of Witch Queen in 2022, Bungie was acquired by Sony as part of a $3.6 billion deal. About 1/3 of that figure went to deferred payments to retain employees rather than shareholders. It was later reported that Microsoft had considered acquiring Bungie, but decided not to because the studio had a high burn rate, meaning their fixed operational costs like employee salaries were quite expensive, making it harder to turn a profit. This makes sense considering that Bungie is located in the Seattle area, which has a high cost of living compared to the US national average, meaning rents are higher and higher salaries are required to retain employees. In addition, the period surrounding the acquisition in 2021 and 2022 had the highest rates of inflation in the United States since 1990 and 1981 respectively, as a result of the COVID pandemic. Bungie's financial woes continued after the Sony acquisition, with missed revenue targets for the 2023 Lightfall expansion, leading to layoffs of roughly 100 employees, or about 8% of the studio's staff. Again in 2024, the studio laid off a further 220 employees after the release of the Final Shape expansion, while others were absorbed by Sony. After the second wave of layoffs, it was reported that Bungie would have become insolvent had Sony not acquired them in 2022. In 2026, after the announcement that Bungie is ending development of Destiny 2, Jason Schrier reported that further layoffs are planned because the studio doesn't have a project lined up for the developers currently working on Destiny 2. This context helps explain why Destiny 3 was never greenlit. Bungie has been burning through its income over the last several years, and likely considered the costs associated with producing Destiny 3 too risky in their precarious financial situation. This is why I find the Activision contract so useful to understand Destiny 3. The Activision deal reportedly would have covered the cost of 4 games with a combined budget of $500 million, paid out over a decade, giving each game a rough budget of $125 million. If we adjust for inflation from April 2010 to the most recent figures from April 2026, this becomes roughly $190 million per game. However, in recent years, AAA game budgets have surged past inflation because of increased development times from an average of 2 to 3 years in the 2010s to upwards of 5 years in the 2020s. If we simply multiply the inflation-adjusted figure by 2.5 to factor in the increased development time, we get a rough estimate of $475 million per game. This back-of-the-envelope calculation is in the ballpark of speculation by industry analysts that Destiny 3 could cost upwards of $500 million. When you compare this cost to Destiny 2 player statistics, which have on average declined year over year since the game's launch in 2017, it becomes hard to justify spending $500 million on Destiny 3. There's always the possibility that the game could bring back lapsed Destiny 2 players, which number in the tens of millions, but that's not a sure bet. In addition to ongoing development of Destiny 2, Bungie has also been developing Marathon. Despite not being released until March 2026, Marathon is actually mentioned in the Activision contract. However, I seriously doubt concrete plans for Marathon existed in 2010 beyond the vague notion of rebooting the series. The Activision contract forbids Bungie from contributing significant resources to prototyping a future Marathon game until certain revenue milestones are reached by the Destiny franchise. If I'm understanding the contract correctly, it starts at a 5% cap of Bungie employees once $375 million have been made, and gradually increases until Bungie is given the freedom to allocate resources to Marathon at their discretion after $1 billion. This implies Bungie had already planned Marathon as their next major project after the Destiny series, all the way back in 2010. However, I doubt the project received significant resources prior to the Activision split. Marathon reportedly cost over $200 million, despite being a much smaller game than Destiny. PvE games like Destiny typically require the creation of more levels and assets than PvP ones, as individual missions and activities are less evergreen in a PvE game. This implies the required budget for Destiny 3 could be significantly higher. Not including marketing at a $60 price point, a game with a budget of $475 million would need to sell about 8 million copies to merely break even. For comparison, at the same price point, Destiny 1 would only have needed to sell 2.1 million copies to hit the $125 million from the Activision deal. As AAA games get increasingly expensive, they've started to make less sense financially. Anything with a budget of $500,000 needs to be a safe bet, because it likely needs to make closer to $1 billion to break even once you add marketing. This makes it harder to make big artistic choices, because if you create something too niche, suddenly you've got a bomb on your hands. This is the general trend in scripted entertainment over the last couple of decades. We've seen budgets and timelines explode, making profitability much more difficult. This leads companies to squeeze consumers to make a profit, which can create a negative feedback loop where sales decline as things get more expensive. Some of the most successful games in recent years have been indie titles because they're cheaper to make and thus buy, allowing developers greater creative freedom. If AAA games keep getting more expensive, it risks an unsustainable financial situation, causing a market correction, which has the potential to hurt those in the industry trying to keep their jobs. It likely also would be challenging for Bungie to develop a game that feels like a direct upgrade to Destiny 2. Figuring out what Destiny 3 should be requires learning from the mistakes of previous Destiny releases and understanding what people liked and disliked about Destiny 2. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some level of insecurity at Bungie regarding launching a new Destiny title. Destiny 1 and 2 had to be rebooted during development, and both games had significant problems at launch. Destiny 1 on the story side and Destiny 2 on the gameplay side. 2025's Edge of Fate expansion could be considered an attempt at a soft reboot of Destiny 2 by making major changes to core gameplay systems. However, many of these changes were poorly received, especially the new leveling system and the portal. I wouldn't be surprised if Bungie's confidence in their ability to deliver a compelling vision for the future of the franchise was shaken by these failures. Ballooning budgets require that any future game be broadly appealing to a large segment of the gaming market, meaning Bungie cannot deliver gameplay that only appeals to a small audience. However, given a lengthy development timeline, Bungie needs to successfully anticipate what players want 5 years in the future. This is a challenging prospect as tastes change over time, caused by innovation and market factors. Attempts to pivot after a game enters production can lead to increased development time and cost. Each of these factors adds pressure to decision makers at Bungie. There also is the problem of the Destiny community. Because the series has existed for nearly 12 years, it's meant a lot of different things to a lot of different people. The easiest path to a profitable game involves bringing the majority of these players back for the next game, but that's easier said than done. The community is a group of individuals with conflicting desires for the future of the series. A major example of this was created by the introduction of weapon crafting during Witch Queen. One group of players saw this as ruining the game's loot chase by making it too easy to get your preferred roll of a weapon, while another wanted crafting because they had been frustrated for years by the difficulty of acquiring preferred weapon rolls. Bungie then had to figure out which group to listen to. They began to walk back weapon crafting over time, which caused the second group to become unhappy in order to satisfy the first. I'm obviously oversimplifying this issue, but it's emblematic of trying to build a game for a large pre-existing audience. You have to decide what subset to cater to, because you can't please everybody. However, doing things a portion of your audience vehemently dislikes has consequences. It risks alienating a portion of the player base, which is dangerous for a game that needs to sell millions of copies. Additionally, Bungie has created several problems for themselves by supporting Destiny 2 for 9 years. Destiny 2 currently has dramatically more gameplay content than a sequel could reasonably launch with, which a segment of the audience will be unhappy about. I've seen some people say they want large portions of Destiny 2 ported to Destiny 3. These people don't want to leave the history that exists in Destiny 2 behind for a third Destiny game. I'll remind you that the DCV was the result of needing to port vast amounts of content to an upgraded version of the engine. Porting anything from older games to Destiny 3 would take away resources that could be spent building new content. If Destiny 3 is greenlit, Bungie would need to manage the expectations of these players. Personally, I think the only gameplay content that Destiny 3 actually needs from older titles is some iteration of existing subclass abilities and weapon archetypes. I'd prefer the destinations and activities be new. I'm indifferent to a mix of new and returning exotics if that makes it easier to build out a roster for a new game. The second problem is the DCV. Players who quit Destiny 2 because of the DCV are going to be unwilling to give the Destiny series another chance unless assurances are made that Destiny 3 won't vault content. Thankfully, Bungie has experience dealing with the problem in Destiny 2, so I'm hopeful that Destiny 3 could be designed with the underlying technology and foresight required to achieve this, but it likely remains a challenge if the game is going to be a live service. The third problem is a narrative one. Because new players can't simply go back and replay Destiny 2's story from start to finish, Destiny 3 has the task of being a narrative entry point for new players. This is why I personally thought Final Shape was the perfect place to stop development of Destiny 2. It delivered a natural conclusion to the game's story. However, Destiny 2 continued to receive content afterwards which began a new story. This story didn't have a clean break from the previous one, instead drawing heavily from old stories, some of which aren't playable like Episode Echoes or Season of the Drifter, making Edge of Fate a difficult place to actually jump into Destiny's story, despite attempts to explain things to new players. Destiny 2 ended development shortly after the beginning of this story, which would be a very confusing place to start Destiny 3 for people who didn't play these expansions. I don't love the idea of throwing the Fate Saga story out, but I think that some kind of reset, reboot, or time jump would be the least bad option. This would at least allow Destiny 3 to start at the beginning of a new story rather than the middle of an old one. The creation of a sequel is always going to draw comparisons to the older games, so Bungie would need to find a balance between all of these considerations in order to make a Destiny game that feels fresh, but also like Destiny. I don't think anybody wants to play a game that just feels exactly like Destiny 2 but with a 3 slapped on the box. The task of figuring out what Destiny 3 should be isn't trivial. It requires a strong vision for the future of the series that players will actually resonate with. Given my lack of game development experience, I know I probably couldn't come up with something that's both compelling and feasible, so I hope that someone at Bungie can. Having reviewed all of the publicly available evidence, I think it's unlikely we hear about Destiny 3 anytime soon. Even if it was greenlit now, it likely wouldn't see the light of day until the early 2030s at the earliest. I think it's far more likely that a small-scale Destiny spin-off is greenlit to test the waters for the continuation of the franchise. However, even that would likely take years to make, and given their financial precarity, it's uncertain if Bungie will even exist several years from now. Don't get me wrong, I really want to play Destiny 3 and would be excited to be proven wrong, but I think the series' history shows just how challenging it would be for Bungie to actually make it. That doesn't make me want it any less though. Thank you for watching this video. If you want to see more videos from me, consider subscribing. I plan to make videos about Destiny 2's Monument of Triumph update in the coming weeks. If you'd like to read any of the sources I used for this video, there will be a document linked in the description. Despite the fact that Destiny 2 ending is bittersweet, I'd like to thank anybody who's watched my Destiny videos over the years, even if this is the first one you've seen. It's been an honor, and I hope to see you over on D2 come June 9th.
After all we've seen, all we've lost, this fight might be our last. So I'm asking you, one last time, to rise.